Yes, Dave, how you doing?
Doing grand, thanks. Right, so I'll quickly grab the screen off you if I may, Marco.
Yeah,
Okay, so hopefully people can see my screen there. And I often begin with giving people a brief, I do a quick intro to Zoom, but what I'd like people to do is just use the non-verbal reactions. If you can click in there and give me a thumbs up or a green tick, just to show that it's working for me. Can I see that for people? Oh, a thumbs up there from Ange. Okay. Oh, it's a heart from Benedict. Love that one. And ticks. Okay, that's grand. That's all working for me. Okay. So a couple of questions here, or a couple of pointers. You may have seen when Marco was advertising this event that I'm not actually an Agile consultant or an Agile coach, nor am I a Scrum Master. So that raises two questions. Number one, who am I? And number two, what am I doing here? So the answer to the first one is I'm a trainer. And the answer to the second one, I'm a trainer. And that's what I normally do with training, giving people a brief intro to what Zoom is all about. So I'll leave that to one side for the moment. But what you've come here is to learn about what ITIL is all about. Okay, so where does that come from? So let's begin with some basis of ITIL. Where did it come from and what does it all mean? Well, it was actually commissioned by the British government quite a number of years ago. What they said was, we've got a number of companies here that are doing things right. And when we mean doing things right, it was ching ching coin of the realm. They were actually being quite profitable. And they said, let's study a number of these companies. Can we find any similarities between them? Can we build a recipe for success? And sure enough, they found quite a number of similarities and found all this stuff. They then asked the question, can we take another group of companies that, shall we say, aren't as successful? They're not making as much money. Are there any things here that is actually missing over here? Well, it turns out the answer was no. Many of these companies were actually doing similar things here. The only difference was they were taking a lot longer about it. They weren't doing it as well. So they took all of this stuff and put it into a pile of books. And those pile of books are known as the ITIL guidance. So there was about 17 books or so. It's a very bad drawing of books. But there was his pile of books. There you go, Ange. You take all of those books, read them tonight, and tomorrow you'll come back and everything will be working fine. Yeah, not quite. That's not quite how it worked. Now, they put all this stuff in approach, which is adapt. Sorry, let me try that again. Adopt the theory, adopt the concepts from here, understand what they mean, then adapt them to your own organization. Last is kind of install. There's only one spell check to use. So it was apply it. Now, with all this information, and really a success or what to follow, there was a simple way of thinking about it. This is what successful people did: steal their ideas, apply them where you can. That's pretty much what it boiled down to. Okay, so we learn and nick their ideas, we tweak them to actually fit our own particular organization. We drop a few things, add a few things in, and then we apply them. Unfortunately, we kind of failed slightly on this one. These two are perfectly fine, but we didn't get very far here. Okay, so that was ITIL version 1, which was all of these books. So then they said, how do we apply this? They then looked at version 2. Now, version 2 tried to identify one of the problems they were trying to fix. And they said the problem we've got in the real world is here is the IT group, and then over here we've got business. And between the two, there is something known as the knowledge gap. Sorry, my writing's pretty awful these days. You see, I spend all day on a computer keyboard. Now, by knowledge gap, we're saying business people do not talk the same language as IT. So business people go to IT and say, I've told the customer you can have the internet on a floppy disk by the end of today. You can do that, can't you? You know how it works. You know, you're technical. Just look, I promised it for them. Just live up to the commitment I made for you. Yeah, fine. And then you've got IT people going back to the business saying the argle boggle and spriggle friggle doesn't goggle boggle. We need to jibble bibble it. What? What does that mean? Is it broken? Do we need to fix it? No, of course, they weren't talking the same language. So ITIL said, why don't we come up with something in the middle here that both of these can talk about? And what they came up was a concept of something called a service. Now, they said the IT people will actually be building and maintaining this service for the business people to actually consume. Okay, so here's a question I want you to think about. What do we mean by a service? What is a service to you? So throw me an answer either in the chat or write on a bit of paper and hold it up. Either will do. What do you understand by the term service? Now, this is where the ITIL people have to scratch their heads and think about, well, I'm going to talk, well, you can type it all in if you so wish, but just whatever you define as being a service. What is a service to you? Feel free to unmute, by the way, if you wish. Products, tangible, digital, means to provide for, oh, I do like some of these. Yes. Okay, identical to a product. I'm going to go along with that, Rennie, actually. That's quite similar. Okay. Something technical thing. Oh, business and their goals. Yes. We start to get a bit closer to what the idea is. Now, rather than me get you to write it all out, why don't I go to the Googles and find this out? So ITIL service, ITIL service management. Let's find out what they say by an ITIL service. An ITIL service is an IT product or offering managed using the information. Have I put anybody else to sleep yet? What is all of that? What? Okay, now, ye gods. That right, I'm going to copy all of that and we're just going to go over a bit of what that means. Now, I did do a search earlier and I came up with a definition where they said, and it does meet with what a number of people have actually said there. So they said a service is a means of delivering value to customers by providing a combination of information written to other people. Falling asleep again. God, is this keeping anybody awake or not? Okay, now that's quite a horrendous definition of it, but what I'm going to do is pick up the important bits to people here. So a means of delivering value to customers by providing yada, 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 and other resources to facilitate without the following. Okay, yeah, keep it simple, stupid. Yeah, that's fairly obvious, isn't it? Okay, now I'm going to leave that as a means of delivering value to customers by providing, and I'm going to get rid of all of those, and I'm going to say capabilities and resources. Okay, to facilitate desired outcomes without the ownership of costs and risks. Okay, so it's a bit shorter, but by God, it's still an insomnia cure, isn't it? That's going to put you to sleep. So let's drill into what each of those sentences mean. A first one, a means of delivering value to customers. Now, there is one important word I want people to see in there. It's this word here, customers. Okay, so what do you mean by customers? Well, people that are going to be buying our services, receiving our services, but what we meant in the ITIL world is business customers as well. We should treat these people as being our valued customers. We are providing them a service. Now, it also says a means of delivering value. What do you understand by the term value? What does value mean to you? Any takers? I know ITIL has a definition of value, but I'm just curious to know what people understand by the term value here. Damn it, Benedict's correct actually, because they do say in the ITIL world, customer perception is important in the definition of value. Okay, so I do like that because it is all down to what these people actually want. So let's suppose you're the customer and what you want is a cake. Not a problem. We just get a cake off the shelf, deliver it to you, job done. Yeah, but that's the wrong flavour. Okay, maybe you should have mentioned about what cake you wanted. I'm sure you've come across a situation. Some of the requirements are not all obviously too clear. Okay, but when Benedict says no, I want a birthday cake and it needs to be lemon. Okay, so lemon cake. Hang on a minute, birthday. So maybe you'd like to have this cake frosted on the top. Maybe you'd like some birthday candles. Maybe you'd like some writing on there saying happy birthday, maybe cream in the middle, these kind of things. Okay, so rather than just a cake off the shelf, maybe we need to consider how we're going to make that cake for her. Now, in order to do this, we need to provide capabilities and resources. What do I mean by these? Resources are to do with the things that are needed in order to produce the cake. Now, these are kind of broken down into two. We can think of resources as being the ingredients. So it can be milk, butter, flour, eggs, sugar, that kind of thing. But there's also going to be a number of enabling resources, things like the oven, utensils, bowl, tin, weights, baking tin, all of those kind of things. So these two are going to go together, but hang on, if we've got all the ingredients and we've got mixing bowls and pots, we can just throw these together, cake done, right? No, we need to understand how it's done. Capabilities, knowledge, desire, outcomes, all of those, okay? And if you're Italian, you'll know capabilities to make a decent cake. We need passion, we need love in order to make a beautiful cake, okay? Yeah, I thought some people would know that bit, okay? Made with love, isn't it? All right. Now, we facilitate the desired outcomes. What are the desired outcomes? Well, we want a cake. No, we want a cake with the right flavor. And it needs to be the right size. And it needs to have the right inscription on the top. And Benedict's birthday is next week. We need to make sure we get it to her before the birthday. So there's a number of these things we need to consider in the definition of value potential. Okay. Now, when I came across this definition, and this was way back in 2003, 2005, somebody asked a question, what does facilitate mean? Now, of course, a number of us were thinking of that question, but he actually had the guts to stand up and say, what do we mean by facilitate? So what do you understand by the term facilitate? Because I see this used a lot in the Scrum world. So I'm curious to know, what do you understand by that phrase facilitate? What does it mean? To provide. Any other takers? Help make decisions easier? Yeah, make something easier. Okay. Now, we drilled into that word and tried to work out what it meant, and it turns out it actually means to cause specific results to emerge. Okay. So you need to be accountable for, but not responsible for. So I'm going to facilitate my son getting fed later. I'm going to ring up Domino's Pizza and I'm going to ensure one gets delivered. Now, I could make the pizza, I could drive down there and pick it up, or I could just cause or bring about those results to happen. And that's really what facilitation is about. Okay. Now, the reason why I harp on about that is because I see so many posts talking about, well, Dave, a Scrum Master facilitates ceremonies. Do they? Funny enough, I've never seen that in the Scrum Guide. But facilitate for some people actually means I arrange meetings. No, you arrange certain outcomes to happen. Okay. Now, this was the idea of this service, and they broke the service up into two distinct areas. There was something called service support and service delivery. Service support was about business as usual, day to day, putting coal on the fire, keeping the place warm, keeping things ticking over. Service delivery was about ongoing changes. This is where we had project teams kicking in. Okay. Unfortunately, the idea of these two separate books caused a division within the business. We had technical people doing this bit, but were technical people involved in the projects? No, of course they're not. That's the project support office. They do all of that work. They put it all together and they deliver it to the techies who are so grateful their tears of joy are running down their cheeks. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, have you ever been in a technical world when you've had a project subjected onto you? Now, they realised there was a bit of a problem with this because many of the changes wanted here actually came from the business as usual people. They said we need these changes to be done. These people put it together and deliver it there. And there was this ongoing iterative incremental approach when we gradually make things better and better for the organisation. And later on, rather than having two separate groups, they put all of these together as one group. And they called it DevOps. Anybody heard of that? Okay, that's pretty much where it's come from. Now, I'm not going to say it'll cause DevOps, but DevOps are basically saying, look, the people that created it should also be the people supporting it. They don't build it and throw it over the fence to the support desk. And the people on support who are actually at the front face, coal face that know what needs to change are the very people who are best at designing and helping these people here. Okay, so it's all about merging all of these together. Now, we talked about what a service is. Next question is, how do we actually make a service? Well, in the ITIL world, so this was version 2, they did the same thing in version 3 and 2011 and a few other versions, but they said in order to create a service, you need 3 components, what they called 3 Ps of a service. They are people, process, and products. These are the 3 components that make up a service. So based on those, what I'd like you to do is consider in Scrum, what are people, process, and products? Okay, so feel free to write it down. Feel free to write it in the chat. What 3 Ps do we know in Scrum? So I'll give you a couple of minutes to quickly give me some answers there. Well, no, there's no speed rush, to be honest. Oh, and I'm going to come back to your answer in a bit, Benedict. There's something you've done there that I do actually enjoy. Okay, I think you're one person who's done something different to what I thought. Brilliant. Okay, any others? Okay, so we talked about the people there. What about the process and products? Now, those of you that are SMs, this may be an interesting exercise for you to do with teams as well. Okay, so question there, Benedict. Feel free, unmute or type.
I think maybe it's a comment because when I look at this, I kind of think we obviously have the people. I'm not a techie, I'm a Scrum Master, so I can't do the actual technical work, but I can kind of own or facilitate the process and make sure we make things easy. And then we have the product owner that in my mind, represents the product. So to me, I actually see it as all 3 capabilities that you need within a Scrum team to make it work in an efficient way. That was what triggered my mind when I saw those 3.
And you would be very correct in that assumption as well. Okay, so I'm glad somebody has got that out. All right. Now, I've done this as an exercise with some Scrum teams, and I say, give me the people, the process, and the products. And the people, they mention, there's a Scrum Master, there's a product owner, then there's developers, and I'm glad he didn't say development team. Okay, for process, they talk about the 5 Scrum events. For products, they talk about the product backlog, the sprint backlog, the increment. They talk about 353. Okay, what's the one person they don't talk about when they talk about people? The most important person in Scrum, customers. It's not mentioned at all. And I said, why don't you mention customers? Oh, we do, Dave. We call them stakeholders. Okay, fine. Then a bit later on, I asked people, what are stakeholders in Scrum? Oh, they're the people we invite along to the sprint review so we can do the demonstration to them and they can see how hard we worked. Right, so they're not people that are going to be a recipient of your products then. Oh yeah, that's the people as well. But hang on, let's think about what we're doing in Scrum. We're looking at delivering outcomes. So for people, what about people in marketing? What about those that are going to be promoting your product? What about those who are going to be selling it? What about those who are going to organize getting it shipped out? Oh yeah, we talk about all of these, but they're actually stakeholders. Well, are they? Are they actually working with you to make sure that your products get out to customers? Oh yeah, they work with us as well. Right, so do you actually have somebody from marketing or somebody from sales on your Scrum team? No, we don't. Well, how can you call yourself cross-functional then? Don't you have all the right people there? So something to think about. Now, in terms of process, they think about the 5 events. That's perfectly fine. But let's think about, what about the process of raising a product backlog item? What about the process of deploying the code that we've done after we finish building it, after we've had the review? What about the process of promoting? What about the process of selling and supporting? There's all of these other processes outside that people don't think about. Okay, and in terms of products, well, we can think of increments. That's a pretty simple one. Okay, but also think about supporting products as well. Just like we talked about with the cake, There's also what is the baking tin, the oven, all of these things. All right. So we do need to think about what are the tool sets we're using. Do you use Jira? Do you use Trello? What are the communication tools you've got? How do you capture feedback? All of those kind of things. Does that make sense? Okay, give me a thumbs up if you all agree with that or all see that part. Yep. Okay. Now, I raise this simply because I ask Scrum people and they often see what exists in the Scrum world. But for me, that is actually wrong. We talk about the Scrum world being here, but in reality, that's actually Scrum City inside a bigger world. And often people in here don't step outside. They don't do what's going on in the wider world. Okay, so this as an exercise, I've often got people to write these down, and then I've said, now cross out all of the 3, 5, and 3 from Scrum. What have you got left? And if there's next to nothing left, sadly, there's a people in a Scrum bubble, not really understanding what's going on in the outer world. Okay, now I'll stop giving Scrum a bit of a kick, and I do realise there's a Scrum Masters on the universe, and in fact, I shouldn't give them a bit of a kicker, but hopefully you've got the idea there. All right. In fact, many of you will know Scrum was actually, well, there's 2 key people behind Scrum. Who are the 2 people behind the invention of Scrum? What's the names of those 2 Scrum people? Anybody know? Okay, they were these 2 guys here, Hirotachi Tanuki, okay, and Ikejiro Nonoka. I hope I spelled the names wrong. Right, okay. These were the 2 key people behind Scrum because they came up in 1986 with something called the new product development. Damn, Marco beat me to it. He loves to steal my thunder. Just swoops right in there, doesn't he? Okay, but I'm going to steal his because I'm going to provide him with a link there before he does. I knew he's got the link, just waiting for that Control V, but no, I slipped it in there. Okay, now one of the reasons why I want to talk about that is because these 2 guys studied how the most effective teams work together and came up with, oh yeah, it is on scrum.org as well. I think that's where I got it from originally. And they came up with the new the new product development game, which described how teams do it, which was in effect like ITIL version 1. They simply came up with a study. What they didn't do is tell you how to apply that. And then 2 other guys, Ken and Jeff, were the ones who came up with the Scrum framework that basically was the version 2. So you can see the similarities there. Can you see that? Okay, right. Now, we talked about people, process, and products in order to deliver a service, and ITIL version 2 discussed about those. I'm not going to go too deeply into those. You can read up about those if you look on the ITIL website. But something I learned in ITIL was they said, each of these are creating a service, but you shouldn't rest on your laurels. In ITIL, you also had something called CSIP, Continuous Service Improvement Program. In version 3, they then just called it continual service improvements. Now, the idea was no matter what you do can always be improved. They said to improve a service, you look at improving the different components of the service. So think about, right, sorry, before I go any further, I'm just going to talk a bit about what CSI is about. It is essentially 4 steps. And the steps are, where are we now? Where do we want to be? How do we get there? How do we know we've arrived? Where are we now? What is current reality? What is our baseline? What is the situation where we are where we are now? And where do we want to be? What is our destination? What is our vision? What is our goal? How do we get there? What are the priorities for action? How do we know we've got there? What is our definition of done? What are statement of deliverables? What are acceptance criteria? Okay, what are the measurable things? Now, I've drawn this diagram quite often in many organizations to give them the idea of how do we begin justifying actions. Now, some of this has actually come from a project. Just a quick show of hands, who are the project managers amongst us here? Can I have a thumbs up or a tick, those of you who are project managers? A few of you, okay. Now, in projects, you will also have this same information. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? How are we going to get there? Why do we need to get there? What are the benefits of us getting there? What would happen if we didn't get there? What is current reality? Or what is the scenario like if we don't make any change? Now, all of that they put together as a business case. So you may have come across a business case already. Some people call it a product backlog item. Think about what that is. It's a justification for some change going on. So CSI actually begins with, should we really do this or not? Okay. Right, now I'll leave out my rant about projects. I'll leave that to one side. But we talked about trying to improve these three components. So how do we improve a product? Well, think about enhancements and fixes to deliverable products. I mean, that's pretty much what Scrum is all about, isn't it? It's an ongoing advancement of the product, okay? But come back to our situation of the cake. How can we improve the cake? Yeah, okay, Marco was saying, feel free to throw questions in there, or just unmute and just jump in with a question if you want. Okay, so how can we improve our cake? Well, we could improve the ingredients. We have things like better quality butter. We could use, I don't know, honey instead of sugar, or we could improve the supporting items as well. We could think about better oven, could think about better mixing bowl. Now, Benedict, you've got a question there?
Yeah, I think I really like the idea of talking about Scrum City being part of a larger world of your drawing. I worked in an energy company where they were very keen on ITIL because I was sitting down with infrastructure, so that fitted really, really nicely for them. And I remember getting a bit of a pushback because I was coming as a Scrum Master, like, Scrum doesn't. And I was like, okay, what is this ITIL thing? Please explain it to me like I'm five. I've never heard of it. And then I looked at it and I was like, I don't see these two things as like conflicting with each other. So I like, to me, I was like, but we're saying the same thing. It's just different. And I even see that it works in an iterative way. So I'm like, I don't see it as disqualifying each other. So why don't we just use what makes sense? And to me, that's also the key in this, is that it's a tool. And look at it. Do you need a hammer? Is that Scrum? Do you need a screwdriver? Maybe it's ITIL. Maybe you need Lean instead, or Kanban. So I think it was very interesting. I ended up having a lot of good discussions with my ITIL people, and we ended up saying, okay, maybe we're not so different, and maybe it can be a happy marriage, and it works super well.
Very much so. In fact, because I learned ITIL first, and then when I learned Scrum, somebody said to me, if you want to know what Scrum is, it's basically how to do CSI. And they said it's just a framework for doing CSI. And I suddenly realized what they refer to. Okay, so good point. And I'd like to return back to that one. And I think also a point there René's mentioned about people are the conflict between ITIL and Agile. I would say yes, but I'd also say people can also smooth over and get these two to be cohesive as well. Okay, which is kind of stolen my thunder with the idea of this bit about people are the problem, therefore people are the solution. But that is a very key point. All right, so I'm glad people have spotted this idea and the Scrum City bit early on here. So we're talking about improving products. So we talked about the ingredients we could improve, so better eggs, sugar, honey instead of sugar, those kind of things, or maybe better tooling. So better cooker, better utensils, but in the Scrum world, this could be, in Jira, we've got too many fields. Maybe we should get rid of some of them. Maybe we should make the Trello card a bit easier and get rid of extraneous information that we don't need. Maybe we should change the colors. There's numerous ways in which we can change products. And in fact, the whole part of Scrum is all about improving the product within product management or product development. Okay, how do you improve the process? Well, first thing we need to look at is, how is our process actually working? What is current reality? How are things working? And this is something I did quite often. I went to organizations and they talked about things not working. And I said, well, what are these things? And it transpires a lot of people didn't really understand what processes they had. So I said, well, let's map it out. Now, I'll tell you a book that's actually good, showing how people mapped out processes and understood how they worked. It's this book here called The Phoenix Project. Anybody read that book? A great story of DevOps. Now, when I first read the book, I got annoyed at one of the chapters because they had a problem and they decided to implement an ITIL process, change management. No, you missed the point. You don't just install a process and run with it. Okay, so clearly they hadn't read anything from their training. But then the next chapter, they understood this wasn't working, so let's fix it. Okay, and they start to make some changes, and they then defined what they said, what is going to be a normal change which needs assessment and approval, and what is going to be a standard change, business as usual. And that's really what a lot of change management in ITIL is about. Now, what I liked was that they found something wasn't working, so they had one of two choices. Number one, throw it away, or number two, make it work. And that was that mindset. So I think they did those two chapters deliberately just to annoy me. Okay, but that's pretty much, so have a read of that. You can understand how it works there. And that's a great story about DevOps as well. Now, sometimes part of improving the process may involve a bit of lateral thinking. Anybody here got an iPod? Just give me a quick thumbs up if you've got an iPod at all. Or a quick green tick or something. Okay. Okay, a few of you. Oh, Benedict, right. So Benedict and see Joe, you may be able to confirm this for me. I don't know whether it's an urban myth or not, but apparently the iPod does not have a power button. Okay, and it seems that they're going to go looking for it now. But I was told there was a problem with the power circuitry, and they talked about the power button. Then Jobs just actually asked the question, why do we need a power button? Well, to turn it on. Okay, why would people turn it on? Well, to listen to music. So you press the power button, you start listening to music. Well, no, you press the play button. So why do we need a power button and a play button then? Why can't you just press the play button to actually power it on and start playing music? Ah, yeah, but then if you don't have a power button, how would you power it off? But why would you power it off? Because we're not listening to music. Okay, so how do you stop listening to music? Well, you hit the pause button. So how about if you hit the pause button and you don't resume playing music in about 15 or 30 seconds, it automatically turns itself off. So he came up with a system of saying, how do you power it up? How do you power it down again? That way, they got rid of one less thing that wasn't needed. Now, it also turned out that change had another profound effect. Because it automatically powered down when it wasn't in use, you had battery saving. So as a result, the lifetime of the battery was a lot longer. It wasn't sitting in somebody's pocket for 3 hours doing nothing, illuminating their pocket. Okay. Now, part of this is to do with lateral thinking. Has anyone heard of Edward de Bono? Has anyone come across that name? Okay, he came up with something called PO, which is a hypothesis. Okay, René's seen it. Now, de Bono you may have heard of because he came up with something called 6 thinking hats, this thing here, and it's all about you adopt a certain hat, a certain persona when you're in a meeting, and there's a list of the hats there. What I actually find is when I'm in a meeting, a huge amount of people adopt this hat. It'll never work, Dave. You know, they're always the doomsayer about how it won't work. Okay, they're good at risk management or risk assessment, all right? But sometimes you do need to adopt a certain hat or a certain mindset. And Marco and I were talking earlier, the white hat can only give the facts, not opinions or feeling, facts only, okay? Now, another book I'll talk about is this thing here, The Goal. Anyone come across this? Elijah Godrat's book? Okay, now in the goal, he talks about something called, the goal, he talks about something called the constraint. And what he said was, in your process, there will always be a bottleneck somewhere. So this is what our process flow looks like, and there's our bottleneck. So we've got lots of work here, and unfortunately, only that amount of work can come through. If we throw more resource here, all we're going to do is overspill it. We're going to get a backlog. If we throw more resource here, it's going to sit around doing nothing. What we need to do is identify this thing here. Okay. Now he did this because this was based on lean principles. Lean principles emerged from Toyota Production System. Yes, theory of constraints. Okay. Now, something I learned about theory of constraints, it wasn't really in the CSI world, how do we go faster? But the question of what is making us go slow? So we need to think a bit about maybe we're doing the things wrongly. And this really, for me, is the first step in CSI. We've got to accept that what we're doing is not optimal. All right. Okay, so how do we improve processes? We review the process. We maybe do process charts. How do we improve products? Fairly straightforward. We talked about that. But this was the key one that I took an interest in. People. Remember we talked about the cake, we talked about resources and capabilities. How do you improve capabilities? Training, coaching, mentoring, supporting, growing, you know, all the things that Scrum Masters usually do with a team, funny enough. That shouldn't be too new to you. Now, a lot of that is based on, and CSI is actually based on the teachings of somebody by the name of William Edwards Deming. A lot of it will contain the philosophy of Deming. Now, Deming said, he talked about people being the problem, but he's also said something to do with the system. Now, a lot of people always mention, well, the system is broken, you need to fix that. But Deming actually highlighted this system didn't appear overnight. People didn't just open their door and pick up the daily newspaper and suddenly find a system just magically grew out the concrete. No, people created that system. So what he was saying was that system created by people, if it has a problem, then it's a problem created by a person. Now, we're not saying that person deliberately created the problem. That system could have been designed 10, 15 years ago, and the person didn't even know there was a problem. But either way, let's stop talking about how it was created. The question is, what do we do about it? And at the end of the day, it's all about the problem may have been created by a person, but it takes another person to actually fix that problem. We will not fix that problem. We will not improve things unless we take ownership of it. Now, one last book I will tell you about is this book. And out of all the books and websites I've given you, if there's one book I urge you to get, this one. This is an utterly staggering read. It really is. Okay. Yeah. In fact, it sounds like that's pretty much what Demi mentioned about people may be the problem, but people are always the solution. Okay. And what we've got to do is turn it around into how do we fix it? Let's stop talking about what the problem is. Let's start talking about how to do something about it. Okay. Now you'll get people that say, well, we don't want to do anything about it because ... Well, if you don't want to do anything about it, then it can't be that big a problem. Okay. Now this book here, Deming's Journey to Profound Knowledge. Oh, sorry, did I put the? I didn't put the link in the chat as well. Okay. So this one, I read the sample chapter and I was halfway through the chapter and immediately ordered it. And then after I'd finished the sample chapter, I immediately ordered 3 more for friends of mine. It is a great read. Okay. Now in there, he talks about the East versus the West thinking. And there's a great story in there about how do we ramp up production versus how do we do more with less. Now, in effect, you had Ford versus Toyota. Now, Ford were producing 10 cars a week. They asked the question, how can we do 20 cars a week? Okay, we need double the amount of factories. We need double, maybe 90% more people. We need to ramp up the following. But Japan, you can't do that. You didn't have enough room. So Japan asked a different question. Instead of saying, how can we do 20 cars? They said, what's stopping us from doing 20 cars? Let's look at what we've got running now. Let's try and make that better. And that's the fundamentals of lean in effect. Okay. Now, what Toyota talked about, TPS and lean, it was all about identify waste, identify bottlenecks. In effect, that's where theory of constraints came from. A lot of it came down to that. Now, I talked about we need to begin with acceptance that things are not optimal. I have a LinkedIn post. I'll just pop it in the chat there. Okay, yeah, Benedict says Toyota's mindset is amazing because I do want to explore that a bit deeper. I always say that CSI does begin with an acceptance that things are not optimal, but there's also a bit more to it than that. We talked about how to do improvement, but the next question is, well, how can we actually get innovation? How do we get people to be innovative? But again, that's the wrong question. We shouldn't be asking, how do you get people to be innovative? We actually should be asking, what's stopping them from being innovative? Well, there's a simple answer to that. As children, we're creative. We build mud pies, we invent games. And then as we get older, when we're teenagers, we're thinking about things and a teacher comes and slams a hand on your desk and tells you to stop daydreaming. Then we get older and we're talking, hey, Marco, wake up. Okay, stop wall gathering, to Marco. We get all of these things that drill into us. We're not creative thinkers. We've got to stop doing that. Or we come up with some idea, we persist in it, and then it either gets stolen by a boss who takes the credit, or it gets dismissed by the boss as we're not interested. But the East do it differently. They've got culture on their side. They've got behavior. They've got desire and passion because their ideas are respected and analyzed in a calm and mature fashion. That's the idea of Kaizen. Always go looking for improvements. Now, their input is valued, not ridiculed by bosses. And if something goes wrong, then they'll sit down and discuss what went wrong and what they learned from it. Because there is a phrase about failure is first attempt in learning. And I've often said, I've never failed. I either succeed or I learn. Because there's always something to get out of that. Okay. Now, how can you get improvements within the organization? You need that culture. You actually need to accept suggestions in a mature fashion. Now, sadly, you won't get it too much in the West. You've often got, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay. And you do have to break through that mindset. But I think people in the West will only change in one of two circumstances. Number one, when you demonstrate here that the benefits of getting there are far better than they far outweigh staying there, then people will move. Or number two, the pain of staying here and doing nothing becomes too great. Then they're forced to move. Okay. Now, out of those two, I'll also give you one last link, and this is going back to Deming. Okay. Deming came up with a couple of books. One of them was Out of the Crisis, and if Japan is doing it, why can't we? There's a few of those there. But he came up with these 14 points of management. It's actually 14 and a half, I think, or 15. And you can see there, remove barriers, education, self-improvement. When you look at a lot of that, you then realize where TPS comes from. And when you look at that and TPS, you then realize where something called the Agile Manifesto came from. A lot of it can trace its origins back to this. Okay, Benedict, a question there?
I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head, and I think a lot of us are feeling with the frustration when we talk about has agile failed, etc. That sometimes I've experienced that you started an agile transformation because it sounded nice, on paper we all want this, but then when you ask the leadership to change their behavior, as you had some very nice concrete examples, encouraging your people to take chances, take the risk, and is that the same that you feel with ITIL, that you have that chance to fail because leadership or management are not on board on how they also need to change their behavior?
Yes, and I used to be in some ITIL forums on LinkedIn, and very often there used to be the same question coming up: what's needed for ITIL to succeed? And a lot of people put things down, but the answer really wasn't, why do you want ITIL to succeed? You want teams to succeed. ITIL is just a vehicle. ITIL is just giving you an idea of what you can do to succeed. And I think the same thing about Scrum. Scrum success is not important. Value, customer success, team success, that's the important bit. Scrum is just a vehicle. Sorry, Scrum Masters. Okay, I'll get off my high horse here, but
No,
you
no,
get the idea.
I think it's fair. I think it's a fair input in like what's the tool talking about Scrum City, but what, because I think some of us feel that we hit that, and then you can say, is it agile, is it lean, ITIL, whatever it might be. Also, classic
Mhm.
waterfall. I think, how would you? Is there something talking about how you get the leadership buy-in or support? Because some of these I think are very basic, encouraging innovation, trying to get them on board with the vision.
When we talk about leadership, very often we talk about a management layer. We're talking about leadership in name, but not leadership in direction or culture. So when I talk to these people, I actually ask the question, why am I here? I'm giving you some ideas and you seem to be finding reasons not to do it. So do you actually want change or not? And get them to think about, I'm going to give you these ideas. If you don't do anything, you're in exactly the same position as you were before, except your wallet has had a dent called Dave's feet in it. Okay. Now, if nothing changes, nothing will change. And as I said before, sometimes if the pain of staying here becomes too great, then they're forced to change. Think about what happened in lockdown. There were a huge amount of companies saying, well, we can't do remote work and you've got to come into work. Then we had COVID, then we had lockdown. All of the companies that found excuses not to do remote working suddenly found reasons to do it. Okay. And it was the pain of change, pain of not change would have been too great. Now, I'll throw some ideas in the chat that they've actually been stolen from my article. Okay. So firstly, you need to deal with change resistance. There's people that talk about, well, what if? You do need to get their concerns out. When the change is coming, people need to be told about it. They need to be informed upfront beforehand, but they also need to be involved in it. So when people start to come up with fears or concerns about it, take those on board and ask them, what should we do about this? Often people at the coalface are the best people to come up with the ideas. Well, if you do that, this thing isn't going to work. Okay, well, how can we get it to work then? What do we need? And it is all about this agile collaboration. It's about bringing people together and getting to discuss it. I think one of the best daily scrums is the entire company all chatting together about what they're going to do that day. Of course, it ain't going to happen. There's always going to be small pockets around the place. But for me, that's going to be one of the best ways. Get rid of all of the walls, bring people together. Okay. Right, I think that's exhausted my time. Sorry, folks. I'm going to leave that screen up in case anybody wants to take a screenshot of that. So if you want to take a screen dump. So Marco, back over to you. In fact, tell you what, I can dump that picture in the chat as well if you want a copy of that. Right, so Marco.
Wow. Wow. That was incredible. I learned so much there. Questions. We have 5 minutes to go, so maybe one question if you have one, but just thank you, Dave. Thank you for bringing this subject. I've learned so much about Scrum, about ITIL, how they work together and where they like crossed over, and you touched on such amazing subjects and all these books to read. I'm set up for the next few years.
My work is done. Okay, well, if you can't think of any questions now, Marco will be posting this in LinkedIn. Just pop questions in there, pop discussions. Can you remember what you said about this, or could you expand on that bit? We're just continuing the thread online, and hopefully other people then can get to see it as well. Okay, thank you, Benedict, and thank the rest of you for attending as well. So Marco, back to you on this one.
Yeah, thank you. And so please do check out our meetup. Please do actually bounce on this talk and give some feedback on the meetup. You'll probably get a notification for that. That'll be great. Or if you've got something to ask us, reach out to us directly or on LinkedIn and let us know. And of course, connect with Dave because his LinkedIn is in the chat. Before we close this meeting, you'll have direct access to that. Otherwise, you'll just have to look him up. Dave Smith. It's quite a popular name, Smith. Okay, lots of Smiths and Jones in the UK. Okay, so hopefully you'll fall on the right one. He looks a little bit younger in his picture, but you should be able to find that from the banner that we did on the meetup. You can see his picture, so you should be able to find exactly the same picture. So, but yeah, do connect with Dungeon Dave Smith, and that's it from me. Maybe I'll ask Ange. What Ange Catiano? Anything that I've missed out?
Honestly, I think it just reinforces how much Scrum can be important to a project, but it's more just in what you need for the project. You know, many times I've said that, you know, you don't always have to follow full Scrum. You just need to follow the parts that work best for you. And I sort of feel like ITIL sort of does some of that as well. It seems a little bit simpler, honestly. Unless you've just done such a great job, but it doesn't seem as scary or as different as I was expecting it to be.
Just going to expand on that point because I've got a couple of minutes left. Before I taught ITIL, I used to teach a number of other courses, so programming courses, system administration, database administration, a whole pile of those things. And when ITIL came along, I suddenly realized that was a glue in the middle that was making things stick together. And when I rewrote some of the course materials, I started to then add service management aspects in. So I didn't talk about how to do backup and recovery. I talked about how to do service management continuity. How do you actually keep the business afloat in the event of a disaster? And I remember one person on a DBA course actually said to us, you're not teaching us database administration, you're teaching us how to think like a database administrator. And I didn't think about that. I thought, yeah, that's actually quite key. So I was giving them the ammunition they need in order to do a good job because I kept drilling into them. Guys, it's all about serving that business need. It's them. Okay. Right. Thanks for that last point.
Okay.
Katie, do you have anything? I'll put you on the spot now.
Nope, just look for the recording. It'll be out within a week to 2 weeks. So look forward to seeing it again.
Yep, follow the LinkedIn and you'll get and you'll hear us when we actually announce the recording. Again, thank you everyone for joining us here. Thank you, Ange, for being a tech host, and Katiana doing the backup. That was really great. I'm glad you didn't have a power cut. And Dave, well, thank you for accepting my invitation to come here. And I really learned a lot. Thank you very much.